Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell, and today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who is in love with someone who doesn't know her real name. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that, did you miss that detail in the letter?
I just forgot it. I honestly just forgot it until you reminded me.
Anyway, but before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
No, we are not. We are not professionals. We are not trained in any of this, nor do we have any pertinent aliases right now.
I know.
And maybe you do that I don't know about.
I never had an alias.
Yeah, me neither.
It would be hard for me to not just be exactly who I am. So,
did you ever have a fake name that you would give to people like randomly for any random reason whatsoever? Okay, I didn't either.
Did you? What was yours?
It was Bethany. I don't know why. I would Bethany. Yeah, like Starbucks order, Bethany. Person asked me at the bar that I don't want to talk about, Bethany, or talk to.
Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't really used that often or for any like malicious reason, but if I ever needed to give a name and I didn't want it to be my name, I would give the name Bethany.
Yeah, I mean, I would do that at the bar, but I wouldn't do it. I didn't have like a consistent name. It would just be the first name that popped into my head, like Mike or whatever.
Piper.
I also used to give people my phone number, but with one digit wrong.
Oh, yeah. All right. Anyway, this is all to say we are definitely not professionals. We are not trained in any of this, so please take our advice as you see fit. We're only here to offer our humble musings, so please have some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love. All right, it's Monday, first episode of the week, y'all. So we're going to do a quick check-in topic before we dive into today's letter. The check-in topic today is inspired by the decision to have children or not in a partnership or relationship combination. Sam and their husband have decided not to have children. My wife and I have decided to have children. We have talked in the past about like what approaching that conversation could look like. But I was actually thinking about it this morning while we were preparing to record. I remember not in the marriage that I'm in now, but in a different relationship that I had found online, like questions to ask your partner when deciding to have children or not.
Sure.
And I found them really helpful because it wasn't just like, oh, do you like kids? Or do you picture yourself as a parent? Or, whatever. And it was more like the nitty gritty shared responsibility of parenting, which I truly think is where a lot of the parental conflict in relationships comes in, is because you're like project managers together. And so all your different conflict styles and communication styles and personal needs come into focus with this little being that you have to raise together. So I thought that Sam and I could sort of review what those conversations looked like in our current marriages. And then we could sort of just check out some of these questions to give you guys some fodder for future conversations like this.
For sure. I love it.
You want to start?
Yeah. Peter and I talked early on about us not having kids. I think that like for us as two people who are incapable of having a child on our own,
right.
That was like I think for both of us, we kind of knew that if we wanted to have kids, it would be a lot of work and money.
It is. Yes.
Because we would have to go through
non-uterus having bodies.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'd have to go through either an adoption process or some sort of like surrogacy or something of the sort. I think that like we were both really clear that if we wanted to go down that path, then we would want to be like really adamant about having kids in our lives. And neither of us felt that strongly about it. I sometimes think of like, if I were in a relationship in which it would be, easy to have kids, right? Recognizing that, even folks who are, heterosexual have difficulty conceiving sometimes, right? Like not trying to pretend like it's like straight people have it so easy, but also just like thinking about like, if I were in a different situation, would I have had kids? And like the answer is probably like closer to like yes or maybe than in the current situation, just because, you know, like the amount of effort and time and money that would have to go into just even creating or, you know, bringing the child into our home would be like so much. Peter's a teacher. And so he's like, I'm around kids all the time. Like I don't need them in my house. And
they can live in the yard.
Absolutely.
Make them a little coop.
Yeah, that would be fun. Chickens are going to be our children. No, I hate chickens. No offense to people who love chickens. So we both kind of were like, yeah, I don't think so. And then we had the door open so like we can always come back to this conversation and like talk through it if one of us is suddenly like changing our minds about it. But neither of us has changed our minds enough to like want to do it and go through the effort and expense of doing it. Like I think about like sometimes the thought crosses my mind of like, oh, it might be nice to do this, but then again, it's like, okay, but like look at all of the processes that our friends have had to go through in order to do this, and is like that what I want to spend my time and energy and money on? And like I don't think it is.
I'm so grateful that you shared that perspective, because I think it's important to talk about becoming parents as not just like a dream or a life goal, but as a series of barriers that you have to cross, that you have to choose to, you know, walk that path, you know, to get over the barriers, to get to the child. And then when you have the child, you have a series of barriers in your own life, you know, and that I really love your perspective, because it shows us not just the black and white idea of do you want kids or you don't want kids. It's also like, do you want kids? Well, maybe. Do you want to go through everything you would have to go through? Is that where you want to put your priorities, your values, your time, your money, or whatever? And you're like, maybe not. And that's how you got to the end of that equation. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. You know, it's not like a situation where it's like, oh, we had sex and now suddenly one of us is pregnant. Like, what do we want to do about this? Right. It's like we would have to choose really intentionally to make that happen for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Willow and we started talking about it really early. I think it's because we had dated previously. So we kind of had this like sense of returning to each other with a more seriousness, if that makes sense. Like we just weren't there to play. We weren't there to make friends. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that I don't mean that overly romantically or like too aggressively. It's just that like I just wasn't there to like waste time or to like fuck around, you know? And we talked about it fairly early, and truthfully, I have to ask her because I don't remember the exact flow of the conversations, but she basically we had both expressed the desire to be parents, but what I don't remember is that I know for a fact she told me she hadn't wanted to have kids until we got together. And what I don't remember is like what that thought process was for her, like if it was immediate or if she was like, oh, I could see this with this person. But she just didn't picture it for her life until we created our relationship and started building, you know, our relationship vision. And from that point on, you know, 3 months into the relationship or whatever, it was always a part of our conversation and always a part of that shared vision so that we could like make decisions towards it in the coming years. Granted, you know, we were both in our mid to late 30s. And so we had a little bit of a timeline in our minds based on biology. But it was also very intuitive. And I think that's a combination of our age, the fact that we were returning to each other in, you know, like that was like our second relationship. We had dated when we were much younger. And so there's like this residual, I don't know, intimacy built up or whatever. And also just because we clicked, because there wasn't a lot of conflict. You know what I mean? There wasn't like a hesitation where we had to negotiate like, well, what do you think? You know, I have friends in my life that spent months, you know, really diligently and lovingly and, you know, in crunchy ways and smooth ways talked out the pros and cons of having kids, what percentage of interest they had, what percentage of disinterest they had, and they, were at different levels, and they had to sort of sit with that discomfort and talk their way to an agreement. And I really respected that process from those loved ones. But that's what ours looked like.
Well, and you knew for a long time that you wanted to be. Yeah, like I feel like we were working in a coffee shop and you were like 23 and you were like, I want to be a mom. And I was like, okay.
Well, I did. But truthfully, towards the end of that was, in the beginning of my 20s. And then towards the end of my 20s, when the long relationship of my life ended, the one that I thought would bring me children, because it was heterosexual, it was very cookie cutter, when that relationship ended and I started thinking about the time to have another baby and to build up that connection or whatever, I started thinking that maybe I would have to decide to either pursue that by myself or put that dream to bed temporarily in a very realistic way, because I didn't want to force anything, but I didn't necessarily have the stability to do it by myself. And I was at peace with that. I really was. But I think when I met Willow and we had the similar vision, we had the similar energy, we had similar lifestyles, I could just see it. I was not withholding, I was like, this is what I want. You know what I mean? And yeah, I wanted to just take a moment before we move to the letter to go over some of the questions that I think are really important, because like I said in the beginning of the episode, it's not just like, do you like kids, or have you always,
sure.
The question to me isn't, have you always pictured yourself having kids? Because so much of that for us is like an inherited timeline, an inherited vision of our life, So for me, there are more important questions. I'm pulling from a website right now, but you can find plenty of these like on Reddit, on the internet, wherever. Just Google like important questions to talk about before you have kids and get the nitty gritty ones. Like don't just go for like, how do you agree on a name? Even though that is hard. Question off of this list, which is on purewow.com, which is mildly embarrassing to read out loud. How do we handle stress and conflict resolution as a couple prior to having children? Because guess what? Uh-huh. The second you bring a baby into your relationship, that kid's going to see every unhealed wound you have in your relationship and your entire life, right? Because sure. They see it all, they see it all and you're going to enact it all on them. So what are your values in handling stress and conflict and resolution in your relationship? I think that's super important to talk about. How will you approach discipline? I think
that's big.
I think that is really big, truthfully. I think we didn't talk about this so much before I got pregnant because I sort of intuitively knew Willow would be on the same page, but it is something that we studied together when we were pregnant. We read the parenting books, we talked about it, we listened to Dr. Becky, that. And I really would encourage people to think about having children as I said project manager, but it really is. It's like you're preparing to debut this thing, and so what are the things are you doing to prepare to debut this new model or this new whatever? There's, it's a lot of prep work.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that question is also important too, as you're thinking about blending families as well. Like we're kind of talking about the decision to have kids, but we also know that that's not the only time that kids enter people's lives and homes, right? Like, and so that question is also important as, if you are somebody who has a child and is considering moving in with or dating or marrying somebody else who has children or doesn't have children, right? Like also important questions to be asking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This list also says some things you liked about the way you were raised and what things would you like to do differently as a parent. I know.
I could write a whole book about that.
I know. And I would really talk about, I remember Willow and I like being like, okay, let's pretend our kid did this in public. How would you want to react? Like, I like really get into it, because that old adage of like, I'm becoming my mother, like it's real, you know what I mean? Like
100%.
And it happens so organically, so secretively, once you have a kid. So get that stuff, recognize those patterns now. Here's a good question. What happens if, in this case, you're trying to conceive? Like, what happens if you don't get pregnant right away? What happens if, you can't, no adoption opportunity finds you, how far are you willing to go? You know what I mean? Like, where's your bandwidth? I think that's a really important question to maybe not lead with, because...
And that's like... But I think it's important because it's like... And the question needs to be like spiritually, emotionally, financially, like time-wise. Like, there's a lot of ways in which our attempts to bring children into our lives might be derailed. And like it can become really expensive and really time consuming and really emotionally fraught. And so it's important to talk about those things and not just assume that it's going to work out well immediately. Like I think that so many folks assume like, yeah, it'll be easy. And then like, it's not, for some folks it is for sure, but for other folks it isn't. And I think people are kind of surprised by that. So I think it's good to talk about it ahead of time so that you can be kind of prepared for like, cool, this isn't working, but guess what? We talked about that. So like we have a plan, we have some things that we're going to try and we know how far we're going to go down this path.
That's such a good point. Just the last couple questions from this list that I think are important, and then we'll get into today's letter. Is religion something you want to teach your child? Is that important to you? What last name will the child have? Those are the last name's a little superficial for me, but I also know it's like really important to a lot of people. What's more important to me is what are the boundaries we will set with extended family? Super, super crunchy topic for lots of people out there, and really emotionally confusing and sensitive for many different reasons. Obviously, talking about finances, how much childcare is in your area, who would stay at home with the baby, whatever, things like that. Other things that come to mind from my own experience is like, if your child is sick, who's going to call out of their job? Do you know what I mean? Do you take turns doing that? What's the delegation of labor gonna look like in those early weeks, early days, and also moving forward? Other thing, in the baby stage, what's important to you? But moving forward, like, yeah, what kind of parent-child relationship do you want to have with that person? What are your parental values? Because parental values, obviously not totally different than your own individual values, but I like thinking about them differently, or I like thinking about them as their own entity that can be grown and nurtured and fostered and enforced and things like that. There are other questions on this list that are really good. There are other questions out there on the internet. I do want to say, as somebody who had a very organic, easy conversation about whether or not they wanted to start a family with their partner, I'm not saying that you need to tangle yourself up in preparation, you know what I mean, and anxiety, getting all these questions right or whatever. But much like therapy, talking about these things, exploring the bounds of your emotions and triggers and values and stuff like that, it's just going to strengthen your relationship. It's just going to strengthen your connection, and it's going to sharpen your vision of the parents you want to be or don't want to be, if you don't want to be caregivers in that way. So don't get too bogged down by this type of stuff, but also I think there are great resources out there to help guide some of these conversations.
Absolutely. I love that.
All right, so let's dive into today's letter. It is from ER, whose pronouns are she, her, who's writing to us from the void. Hi guys, longtime listener, and I really appreciate the dedication you put into the pod. Even though you guys have helped me through a lot over the last couple of years, I seem to have gotten myself in quite a mess. I've been married for 8 years, but together with my partner, I'm 35-year-old female, he's 38-year-old male, for 11 years total. Through the entirety of our relationship and marriage, he struggled with being honest about anything and everything. He recently got fired from his job, leaving me the primary breadwinner of our family, including 2 young children. He's struggled with money for the most of our time together, driving a large wedge between us that has only gotten worse. Money problems have included a vehicle repo, missing mortgage payments, etc. All things he's hid from me until they came to light on their own. To say I am beyond over it is an understatement. We have basically lived as roommates for the past 2 years because I'm so sick of having to be his mother. Fast forward to a few months ago, I was on an app just to see what was out there, very casually and not looking for anything serious, and was hiding my identity because of how unserious I was, really not even knowing what I wanted. I met someone, female, 34, who completely rocked my world. If I have to put a physical label on myself, I would say I am bisexual, but I'm really not into labels, just more about connection. When I tell you this woman has made me feel so much love and light in just the last few months, that's an understatement. Obviously, my situation is complicated, though I've been taking steps to begin the process of divorce long before I met her. But because of finances and our children, I have been hesitant. The caveat to this is she is also still technically married to her wife, but she moved out months ago and is now with a man. With my sensitive situation, she also doesn't know my real name. When we met, I didn't think we would ever get past talking. It was just going to be an outlet for both of us. Fast forward to now, I've completely fallen in love with her. When I'm with her, my world stops. We have great communication, we laugh all the time, and it's the best sex I've ever had. But in protecting myself at first, I am now stuck with how to navigate this going forward. My marriage is completely over, and I love her completely, but I don't know how to move forward. Help.
All right, ER. Thank you so much for writing to us. I know that this is a really confusing situation that you're in. There's a lot of sort of instability that's happening right now where you're planning on leaving this relationship. A lot of instability in terms of like discovering a lot of, untruths, lies, half-truths that you've been told by your partner, which can also feel like a rug is being torn out from under you. And then this sort of like experience of meeting someone new and developing feelings that are surprisingly strong with somebody who you wouldn't have expected to have strong feelings with. It feels like a lot is kind of like swirling around you. And it makes sense to me that you are like, how do I move forward? Like, which way is the way that I should go? So I totally understand and empathize. And I really appreciate you asking us about like, how do I navigate this? Because it feels kind of unnavigable at the current moment. So we're going to offer you some love and some advice and how Sierra and I think you should move forward, some perspective to say, here are some questions that you might be asking yourself about what you want and when and how you want it. But before that, we're going to take a quick break.
All right, my darlings, welcome back. And thank you to our letter writer for trusting us with this letter. Everything Sam said is so real that it makes sense to me that this is feeling like a lot. And I'm going to offer you some incredibly compassionate but very direct observations. Because from my vantage point, because I'm over here, I'm not in the chaos. I have like my popcorn and my Stanley full of water because I'm a basic mom. I
just love that you have a Stanley.
I know.
I know. You brought it out and I was like, oh, what am I supposed to do with this new information?
Yeah. Just process it, my friend. Just process it.
I'm just holding the complexity of you.
Yes,
that's what I'm doing.
And let me tell you, it's a great water bottle. Like objectively, like the execution of the water bottle, A+. Price point,
I believe you.
Would never fucking pay for it myself. It was a
Listen,
gift.
it comes in every on-trend color that you could possibly want. So I get it. I went to REI for the first time in my entire life recently, and they had a whole display of them. And I was like,
Yeah,
do
they're
I
like
need a
$50.
Stanley
Yeah,
cup?
you do.
Because it was like,
Yeah, you
it was
do.
arranged in like different shades of pastel rainbows. And I was like, this is so beautiful. And then I was like, what the fuck would I ever do with this? I don't
You would
need
drink
this.
out of it every single moment of your day.
Yes, I
And
know.
you
I don't
would be
leave
a
my
hydrated, dewy bitch.
So I just drink from glasses that are
Okay, yeah. Well, you're a
in my-
peasant freak. Anyway. Okay. This is all to say, I'm going to, from my vantage point with my basic Stanley and my popcorn and my compassion, I'm going to say some things to you that are just observations. Literally, I'm just pointing out what I'm seeing. Number one, you are still in this relationship with your husband, logistically, if not emotionally. And in order for anything to move forward in your romantic life in any other direction, that has to be tackled. And I don't mean that in any shameful way. I'm just saying that to you so clearly because you're getting bogged down with the mess of it. You're getting and when our anxiety spikes, when we've got a lot to do, when we don't know what the next step is, when we're torn, when we're emotionally confused, we start to tell ourselves we don't know what the next thing is to do. There's no right next step, yada, yada, yada. But I can tell you from my comfortable vantage point that nothing else can move forward. Picture it like a dam, right? And it's all of these pieces of wood are jamming up the water, which is your joy. Do you know what I mean? And right now, a little water is getting through, and that's you talking to this person, having a relationship with this person, right? Your joy, you see the potential of this joy, but you can't really access the full joy until you get that big stick out of the fucking river.
Sure.
I
love this metaphor.
Thank you. Because that big stick will go and then more water is going to start flowing through. And then you're going to have to deal with the other stick, which is the fact that not only is she also still married, but she's dating somebody else. What does that mean? What does that mean for your relationship? Listen, if that is a part of your relationship agreement and her relationship agreement with these other people, I have no problem with that. But everything will flow easier when you start addressing these bigger things that are sticking up your life. And I know as a mother, I know as somebody who has to be super frugal right now because we are raising a young person with X amount of money in our bank. Like, I get it. I know that there are reasons why we stay in places for the betterment of our family. And if that is true, that's fine with me. You stay right where you are because it seems like it's a good place for you to be for your family. But you can't stay in the dam then, right? It's just gonna get more stuck.
For sure. Absolutely. And, I absolutely 100% believe that this person that you're talking to is like a really amazing person and that the attention and affection that they are giving you is real and wonderful and beautiful. And I also want to name that like your receptivity to that affection and attention is like on level 100 right now because you've just gone for years and years with your attention and affection level at 0, right? So like now of course this feels like overwhelming and intoxicating and like, oh my God, the way that I'm thinking about it is like, have you ever had one of those days where you're like running around and doing a bunch of stuff and you like don't eat, and then suddenly at like 3 p.m. you like eat Taco Bell and you're like, this is the best thing that I've ever eaten in my entire life because
you're
it's
like this is a Michelin star Taco Bell.
Absolutely. You're like, I cannot believe how good this is. Like, I would never want to eat anything but Taco Bell in my entire life. And then like after you eat it, you're like, okay, well now that I'm full, I'm realizing that like, oh, Taco Bell's fine, but it doesn't need to be the be all end all of every food that I eat.
I did that literally with a McDonald's burger. I was so hungry. I ate it and I called Spencer and I was like, this was actually like really good. And he was like, really?
It's like, or were you
then
just
I've
hungry?
had a McDonald's burger since then, and I was like, oh no, I was just hungry.
Like, it's fine. It's like, it's not, but it's not like the best thing you've ever eaten, you know?
No.
Right.
Correct.
So like, I think you're in this moment where you have been so starved for so long that you're experiencing this thing. And like, don't get me wrong, Taco Bell's great. Like, I love Taco Bell. I'm not trying to disparage it in any way or say that like you shouldn't be eating it. What I'm saying is that like, but it is like changing your perception of this thing, because it suddenly feels like, oh my God, every pleasure center in my body is being touched right now. Then it has never been touched before, right? Like, I have been starving for this for so long, and now I'm getting it. And oh my God, it's the best thing I've ever experienced. That's not to say that like you and this person can't figure out a way to move forward and like be in relationship with each other. I'm not saying that the relationship is somehow like not real or valid, but I just want you to be like paying attention to that, because I also want to remind you that this person doesn't know your real name, right? Like, this person is currently also going through a big divorce and also with another partner, right? And again, polyamory exists. I don't know what their relationship status is or like what's going on there, but there's like a lot of things here where it's like, what is the path forward for you, not just to like feed your empty stomach with something that's going to like make you feel really good, but also to say like, if you really want this person, then like, what are the actual sustainable steps to get you to a point where this is like a consistently filling relationship, and not just oh, I'm filling a void right now and it feels so good because that void has felt so empty for so long. So like, first things first, you need to get clarity about what is happening with your divorce and what is happening with this partner's divorce, right? You need to get some clarity about what your real name is, right? And by that, I mean, you need to like actually talk to this person about who you are and where you're coming from and what your stuff is, and not just as an escape from the void that is your current marriage, but as a way to like build towards something. Like, what are your hopes and dreams? What are you looking for in a relationship? What does it look like for you to bring somebody else into the lives of your children, right? Like, there's lots of different questions that need to be answered here, and that's not going to happen unless you are being honest about who you are, what your situation is in this moment. And I think right now what this person is offering you is an escape, like a journey into a potential future that is removing you from what needs to be managed in the present, which is like, what do you want from this marriage, and how are you figuring out what you need to do to get out of something that's not serving you anymore?
Yes. Yeah. And I want to point out one thing on that note. You write, when I'm with her, my world stops. And let me remind you why. Because she is one part of your life, and the rest of your life doesn't ever meet her, right? And so no wonder why it feels like all your stresses fade away, is because you don't have to approach those stresses when you're around her, right? It's really easy. It's really easy to use the excitement of the present, the excitement of this new love, lust, great sex, like even the genuineness of this connection, to feel seen for the first time in so many years. It's really easy to use that excitement to avoid the present, right? To avoid
Absolutely.
what's waiting at home. And,
it's an escape.
And that is the stress that you're feeling right now. We're not saying that this can't be a real future. We're not saying that this relationship can't be built into something more sustainable. But from our comfortable, hydrated vantage points, we know why. We know why it feels so good and also so confusing and so rewarding, almost like a drug, right? I think about how the quote about sobriety, the goal is the goal isn't to stop drinking. It's to create a life that you don't want to escape from. And so with that idea, the goal in this relationship isn't for you to stop seeing this woman, right? It's for you to address the parts of your life in a real way, address the parts of your life that are not serving you any longer, because time is passing, because this is your life, and it's your, and you deserve to be happy. You deserve to find a sustainable joy.
And the longer you spend treating this woman as only an escape from your current predicament, the harder it's going to be for you to be able to build something sustainable with her, right? Like, if at the very least, if you really feel that you love this woman and that you want to be with her, then do what you need to do to be able to make that relationship sustainable for you, which is to find a way out of the current relationship, the current marriage that you are in, and not just use her as an escape from the troubles of your current marriage.
Yes, absolutely. All right, my darling, I know that's a lot, but you need it. You know you're at this dam and it's not sustainable and not enough water's getting through. And so it's time to do something differently. And you know what that is. We love you. Thank you so much for writing. We hope that this helps.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like to join us for our monthly office hours, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to those monthly office hours. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship meme, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music recording, editing, producing all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcasts and his music. And remember, right now in this moment, you are feeling powerless and like you don't know what the right decision is, but you just have to do one thing to get the ball of change moving, to make and build that life that you know you deserve. And if all else fails,
just break up.